Hi there. Welcome to the Sober Circle channel. Enjoy this speaker tape.
And they looked at him and said, well, we're not too thrilled about hearing that piano story again either. So if you haven't heard the piano story, just sweat it out and go ask him yourself, because I'm not going to tell you, because I waited 3 weeks to ask him. He is a mid-school dropout, kick-out, I think is a better word. They're narrow-minded about drinking when you're in mid-school. They're also narrow-minded about you drinking in dental school. And they're really narrow-minded about you carting bootleg whiskey in a Hearst. So mortician school didn't work out either. Of course, the old guy who was hauling around didn't seem to mind. He just laid there. But it is a great privilege and a great honor tonight to introduce to you Rosie from Kingsville, Texas.
My name is Ray Vowel. I'm an alcoholic. I haven't had a drink since July the 20th of 1971. And I used to say that I was grateful for that, and my sponsor told me he won't hear me say that anymore until he thought I was. And he hasn't yet said he thought I was, so I just say that I try to be a little bit thankful each day for sobriety, for the privilege of meeting with people like you in groups like this. And I cannot wait to get back to South Texas and tell them that I came up here in the High Plains country and went down in a hole in a Methodist camp to meet with a bunch of alcoholics and Al-Anons. And I have to wait till tomorrow because I haven't been here after dark. I may not be able to tell them anything. I don't know what goes on here after dark. I really thought that was great. You know, you can't gamble, and you can't have any dogs or pets. Is everything else all right? Sounds kind of like a Baptist meeting to me. You know, do anything you want to, just don't dance, you know. That's why Baptists don't make love standing up. They're afraid somebody think they're dancing. That's what I guess I better clear up. I better qualify myself a little bit and tell you why I can say this. I am a Baptist minister. I pastor a Baptist church in Kingsville, Texas. And I don't mind you knowing that. I'm no more ashamed of being a Baptist preacher than I am of being an alcoholic. They're both incurable, you know. You just have to enter a program of recovery. That's how you live. You never get over either one of them. You just have to learn to live with them and kind of tolerate. I recently came back from a meeting with, and I have to do a little name drop in here so that, you know, you'll know who I am. And that's when I got all dressed up, took a bath, shaved, everything, deodorant, a whole mess. I was in a meeting about 4 months ago with Dr. Billy Graham and his brother-in-law, Dr. Leighton Ford, and Dr. Bill Self from Atlanta. For 5 days in Houston. It was an invitational meeting for Baptist preachers, and Dr. Bill Self shared with me something that happened to him, and I don't want to offend anybody. I didn't come to preach. I'm not going to preach. You haven't took up collections, so I don't feel inspired to preach. I want you to know right off the bat that it's not my intent to hurt anybody's feelings or anything like this, but Dr. Bill Self was telling me that he was pastoring a little church down in Gloucester, Louisiana, and about half of his congregation were oil field people, you know, and every church down in South Texas and South Louisiana and the Mississippi coast has a few of these people in the church. But some of them do go to church, and they come, you know, in classified, you know, they come in 2 sizes, one with the belt over the belly and one with the belt under the belly, you know, and you can always find the local Baptist church down in South Texas. It's always the one on Sunday morning with the blue smoke over it, you know, where the deacons stand out in front and smoke, wait for church to start. And Dr. Self had this fellow that came to see the light finally, and he joined the church, you know, and he's probably the worst guy in the whole town. And finally the whole town's been after him, and they've worked on him, and they've prayed for him, and they finally get him into the church, and he just about drives Dr. Self crazy. He's there every time they open the door, you know. He's there to sing bass and vote no every time they have a committee meeting. And so he came down one morning and he said, the preacher said the Jehovah's Witnesses are giving me a hard time. And he said, what do you mean? And he said, every Saturday morning they come and knock on the door and they ask me all these questions and they try to give me stuff and I don't know what to say to them. So Dr. Self said, well, I don't know much about him either. And he went over to his shelf, you know, and he pulled down one of his books and he got it down and he looked up and he said, well, he said, it says here that they don't believe in saluting the American flag. He said, that's all I need to know. You don't tell me anymore. That's all I want to know. He went down to the hardware store and he bought the biggest American flag he could find. And he went home and he stapled it on the wall of his living room. The whole wall was covered with American flag. Saturday morning, sure enough, here comes the little blue-haired lady with the bag over her shoulder. Rang the doorbell. Said, I've got something good for you. He said, lady, I'm going to listen to what you got to say, but he said, first, you're going to salute that flag. She said, I don't know about that. He said, lady, you're going to salute that flag. So she got up there, you know, and she says, I pledge allegiance to the flag. He said, lady, louder, I can hear you. She said, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and she got all finished. And he said, now, lady, what have you got to say? She threw that bag down. She said, I've been selling Avon for 15 years, and I ain't never had to do that. I've had several people that came up to me tonight before the meeting, you know, and they've referred to the fact that they wanted to hear a drunk Baptist preacher, and I'm sorry, you're late. This Baptist preacher hasn't been drunk in almost 11 years, and with the grace of God and the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, it's not my intent to do so today. But I was in Del Rio. I've met some of you here that was in Del Rio about 2 years ago at the border conference, and I was late getting there. Faye and I lived at that time in Beeville, which is about a 5-hour drive, and I had a funeral. And so I came out of the funeral, and I jumped in the car, and we took off and drove straight to Del Rio. And I got there about 10 minutes before the meeting was to start at 8 o'clock, and I was to speak. And those of you who've been to the border conference realize that it's kind of like this one. It's a very relaxed atmosphere, and the dress is very casual. And I went running in, Hal, and I had on my burying suit, which is black with a vest, you know, and so I have two suits. I have a dark one for burying and a light one for marrying. And so I have, you know, and then I have a brown one for when I'm not sure exactly what they want to do. And so I went running into the meeting there, and I had on my, you know, my glad rags there, and I bought it new. Did you buy that new? Well, now you can laugh. Some of you laughed, but some of you knew exactly what I was talking about, didn't you? I haven't always worn new suits, you know. For the last few years I've been able to, but some of them, you know. But anyway, I went in and this guy said, what are you, some kind of preacher? And I was in a big hurry, and I said, as a matter of fact, I am. And he said, what kind, a Baptist? And I said, as a matter of fact, I am. And he said, you can't be a Baptist preacher and be an alcoholic. And I said, that's true, but you can be an alcoholic and be a Baptist preacher if you do it in that order. You see, you can be an alcoholic and do anything you want to if you're just careful what order you do things in. I'm really happy to be here, and I really look forward to coming. I got to be honest with you. When Bill and Linda called me, I've been in the dark all these years. I didn't know y'all were coming up here, going down in this hole every year and staying a weekend. I really didn't. I didn't even know the hole was up here. You know? But I think it's really nice, and so far I've enjoyed it. Now, I want to apologize in advance that I've got to leave in the morning because I've got to get back to South Texas before Mother's Day because I don't want the church to find out that for what they're paying me, they get a real preacher. So I have to get back, so I will be leaving, but I'm not going to miss too much. Now, Dan, I'm sorry, I will miss your talk tomorrow night, but I'm rooming with Charlie Davis, and I'm going to make him tell me before we go to bed tonight everything he's going to say. So I won't miss anything much, except what you can write it down, send it to me. So I want to thank you for inviting me. We're really happy to be here. I think it's a beautiful meeting, and the fellowship and the love is just great. And I wish I could box up about 20 pounds of it and take it back to church. But unfortunately, they wouldn't know what to do with it. I recently moved to a new church, and I've only been there a year, and I've been preaching out of chapter 5. And we're, they don't know. But that eventually we're going to teach them something. I've already taught them a few things. You see, this being a God-given program, I hope that God, me talking about God's not going to upset you because I work for Him, and although you paid my expenses up here, I work for Him the rest of the year. So I unashamedly call my higher power God because He is. And I heard this expressed by Dr. Leighton Ford a lot better than I can. He said to us in this meeting, he said, God is God. He hasn't applied for the job, and He's not waiting for you to call Him to interview Him. He really is God. He's already God. And He's not waiting for your acceptance or your approval. He really is. But this being a God-given program, I had a little problem when I was in seminary. But then I began to realize that when God realized that the people that He had created were becoming alcoholics, He took care of them. Now the very basic nature of an alcoholic is that they must have a little bit more of everything than anybody else. That's why we are what we are. Now, I don't know what makes us that way, but I know that that's why we are what we are, We wanted more to drink. We wanted more girls or boys, whichever the case may be. We want more to eat. We want a bigger house. We want a bigger car. We want bigger payments. We want a better job. And God knows this. So when He gave us a program of recovery, He took all of this into consideration. See, when I got to the seminary, I finally understood this. That He gave the whole world 10 commandments, but He gave us 12 steps. And so you see, from that point on, I never had any problems in my relationship between my higher power that I call God and the church and the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. If the people at church want as much as God gave the rest of us, I guess they'll have to get drunk. Because God just gave them 10 commandments, and you know what they've done with them? As a matter of fact, what they've done is they've taken and made the 10 suggestions out of them, and then disregarded most of them. Now, we don't do that. You see, in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, you're involved in the 12 steps, so you pretty soon you're not there. You see, I was sitting in a class one day, and the guy said, said, I'm just high on love. And I said, really? I said, that's great. I used to be too. He said, what do you think about marijuana? I said, I don't think about it. He said, what do you know about Coke? I said, I like them. And I realized that we have I finally know what the generation gap is. I don't have any problem with the generation gap. You see, when I was a little boy and you went to parks, you hid in the grass. Now you smoke it. So what we had to do is we had to develop a whole new thing, see. And so long back in July of 1971, when I had everything just about as messed up in my personal life as I could get it, I decided that I'd get some help. Wasn't hard. Took a county sheriff, a judge, 2 doctors, my boss, the bank, the mortgage company. They all got together and decided I needed some help. You have a choice. And I had a choice. I had every choice that there was. You know, I could die, go to jail, or get some help. So I decided I'd go to Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, I hear, you know, I've been in meetings where they read into a preamble, you know, an honest desire to stop drinking. I haven't had a desire of any kind in a long time. And I didn't know what the word honest meant, you know. When I first went to the meeting, you know, they said, we're not allied with any sex. And I said, me either. They said, we do not wish to engage in any controversy. I said, me either. So I run into a fellow there at the meeting, you know, and I said, well, maybe I better find out what this is, you know, and I said, what is AA? And he said, I don't know. I said, how does it work? He said, I don't know. I said, how long have you been in it? He said, 12 years. I said, how do you work it? He said, I don't know. I said, who runs it? He said, nobody. I said, well, who's in charge? He said, nobody. I said, well, who decides who's going to do what? He said, everybody. Well, I've been raised a Baptist. I knew that wouldn't work. You see, you got to have a committee to do anything. You know what a camel is? A camel is a horse put together by a Baptist committee. See, we've had a lot of bad publicity in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, the Baptists really, I really resent it because I don't know why y'all keep making remarks about the Baptists. We've contributed more to Alcoholics Anonymous than anybody. 90% of the members came there, you know, from a good Baptist home, you know. I can remember that, you know, when I first came in, there's 2 things used to really irritate me. People get up and say, I was raised in a good Christian home. And another one was women. And women, I could not stand women alcoholics. I was scared to death of them. I didn't like them. I didn't trust them. You know, and they'd get up, and it seemed like every one of them would get up and say the same thing. You know, the reason I'm an alcoholic is because when I was born, my daddy wanted a boy. Heck, I was born in 1934. My daddy wanted a mule. And by the time I was 18 years old, he thought he got what he wanted. So I came into the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I didn't have an honest desire to do anything. I came to get people off my back. And I learned something very, very early in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. You see, I had been in medical school kicked out, but I had done well in anatomy. I had learned one basic anatomical and physiological fact, and that is that the jawbone and the eardrum don't work at the same time. When you talk, you do not have to listen. And so I came into AA and I became a talker. I didn't have anything to say. But that didn't mean to do it. I didn't stop an alcoholic. You ever see an alcoholic didn't say anything because he didn't have anything to say? You know, we walk into AA meetings and we see people all the way around the room, and there'll be 4 or 5 over here and 3 or 4 over here, and it seems like everybody's sitting there listening intently to what the guy's saying. That ain't true. That ain't what they do. They're waiting for him to take a deep breath so they can jump in and tell their story. You know? I don't know. I got on the plane this morning with my first sponsor, a guy that made 12-step call on me 11 years and 10 months ago sitting over here. And I really had a problem. I had something really big, you know. I mean, I wanted to talk to somebody about a problem. He comes walking in 35 minutes late, sits down, and he said, I'm in the doghouse. I said, I know, but let me tell you what happened. He said, no, wait a minute. He said, I can get home before 4:30 this morning. I said, but let me tell you about it. And he never did. He told me, he talked and talked and talked. We got on the airplane. He read the racing form. Can you imagine somebody sitting by a Baptist preacher on American Airlines reading the racing form? No respect. And then he told me he had the winning horse in the 7th race, and he had a $10 bet on it. Didn't even split it with me. Sat up all night last night playing pool. I haven't told him anything. But we came into the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I decided what I would do is, if I just talked hard enough and fast enough, I wouldn't have to listen to anybody. And so I started talking. Boy, I talked. I talked over here and I talked over there, but there was 2 things I never did. I never talked in my home group, and I never let anybody that knew me hear me. You see, because I was good. I'm going to tell you, it's a shame you didn't get to hear it. I mean, it was great. It was entertaining. All this and informative. The only thing, there was just one thing wrong with it. It wasn't true. Well, one night, a guy named Wilson Ian from Mesquite came up to me and he said, hey, he said, I want you to come over Saturday night to the Mesquite Big Town group and speak. And my wife was standing there, and he said, honey, you come too. And I said, wait a minute, you know. I spent all week trying to convince her she didn't want to go. She went anyway. And I didn't have sense enough not to tell all that bull I've been telling, so I stood up and went through this whole stuff, you know. We got in the car and started home, and my wife said, honey, you know, very, very nice. You know how they are, you know. She says, honey, a lot of that stuff you talked about tonight never happened. And I said, a lot of things happen to me when I drink you don't know about. She said, a lot of things happen to you when you drink you don't know about. And the things you talked about tonight were not there. The next morning, and I've lived for 10 years, almost 11 years, on a diet of Al-Anon and eggs for breakfast. The next morning, I got this gosh-awful pamphlet. I don't remember where it came from. I don't even remember the name of it, but I remember reading it, and it said, the alcoholic who remembers too fondly and dwells too long on his past drinking experiences is playing a dangerous game with his life. And I thought, well, wait a minute, maybe something serious about this. Maybe some of them old boys down there really got problems. Maybe I ought not to joke around with them anymore. Maybe I better not tell any more funny stories, you know. It might hurt some of them guys. So I slowed down on my talking, and I started going to closed discussion meetings. Now, that's disastrous. But I picked one that was harmless. It was a beginner's meeting. Nobody in there with over 30 days sobriety except the chairman met on Saturday night at 7 o'clock. Had bingo at 8 o'clock, so I'd go ahead and go to the 7 o'clock discussion meeting. And the discussion meeting went something like this. I drank a half a gallon of shoe polish. That's the opening speaker. Next guy said, yeah, I understand what you mean. I drank 2 gallons. Next speaker said, Bill, said, yeah, I can understand that, but I never drank any shoe polish. I ground up the paint off the walls and mixed it with turpentine and drank that. And then it goes on and on, you know, it just gets deeper and deeper and deeper. And I was sitting there waiting for my turn. I already had decided what I was going to tell him that I'd drink. And we had a fellow in the group who'd been sober 27 years. His name was Curly. And Curly stopped the meeting. And he said, have any of you fellows ever been so drunk you didn't remember what you did? Well, sure. Everybody has. He said, have you ever been to bed with a 95-year-old woman with sores all over her body? And I said, no. He said, how do you know? No, that sounds funny tonight when I stand here and tell it, and it was kind of funny the way Curly told it, but you know that little statement right there? That little statement right there got me into the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Because before midnight that night, I had come to the full realization that there was absolutely nothing in the whole world that I could stand here before you tonight and say that I know I've never done. And if I'm in that condition that I cannot stand before you tonight and tell you anything in the entire world that I know that I have not done, then I must have been a very sick individual. And if I was that sick, maybe I needed some help. And so I went to, gosh, he was awful. Horrible man. Never once has he told me what a good job I'm doing in AA. And I said, what do you think I ought to do? And he said, well, have you got a big book? And I said, I sleep with it every night. And he said, why don't you try reading it? He said, what I think you ought to do for the next year, he said, is not do any talking in AA. He said, I think you ought to forget about a drunk-a-log. And I think you ought to get involved in the 12 steps of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so for that reason tonight, I'm not going into a drunk-a-log. The main reason that I'm not going into a drunk-a-log is that it's no longer necessary for me to impress you that I was a bigger drunk than you were. There are some people in this room tonight who drank more than I did, and there are probably some people in this room who did not drink as much as I did, and neither of those facts is important. It's only important that I know that I cannot successfully drink alcohol. That when I drink, my life becomes unmanageable. I'm powerless over the thing called alcohol. And I got involved with the 12 steps. My sponsor would take me to meetings every night. And folks, I'm not talking about once a week or twice a week. I'm going to tell you something. We went to 10, 12, and 15 meetings a week. I never said a word. I wasn't allowed to say anything. I could ask questions, but I was not allowed to express opinions because I was told I didn't have one. He says, when we go to a meeting and they talk about drinking, you can join in. When they talk about sobriety, you don't have anything to say. And so I began to look at the 12 steps of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And step 1 says, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and our lives have become unmanageable. That's simple. No big deal. I said that first day. There are two meanings. You know, I used to say there's two meanings to AA. There's Alcoholics Anonymous and absolute absolute abstinence. I believe there's a third meaning. Admitted and accepted. You see, just admitting you're an alcoholic is not enough unless you accept the fact and believe it. You know? You ever see anybody come running into AA saying, hey, I'm powerless? People come to Alcoholics Anonymous, folks, because they're desperate. I have never yet met anybody who walked through a door of an AA group that was not desperate. I've heard that people. Have you ever met anybody in AA who came down there because their wife loved them so much they needed to get some rest? Have you ever met anybody in Alcoholics Anonymous who came running into the meeting, because they wanted to get away from their boss because they were doing such good work, he bragged on them and embarrassed them? I've never met anybody like that. I've seen them come through the door barefooted, no shirt on, their backsides hanging out of their pants. I've seen ladies come in, that didn't know where their children were. I've seen people come in, in every shape, form, and fashion, folks, but they all come in for one reason: they're desperate. And you say to them, you must admit you're powerless over alcohol, your life's unmanageable, and they won't fight. I'm not powerless over anything. They just don't understand me. The world just does not understand my problem. You see, there are two things that are basic in an alcoholic's life that he must have in order to maintain a life of alcoholism. One is rationalization, and the other one is justification. He must be able to blame what he's doing on somebody else, and he also must be able to excuse himself for having done it. And folks, until you come into the program and admit you're powerless over alcohol, you're going to keep rationalizing away, and you're going to keep smelling bad in the morning. You know, it's very hard to get an alcoholic to admit they're powerless over alcohol. Have you ever seen a powerless alcoholic? Have you ever met a poor man in a bar? I never did. Everybody I ever met had just pulled off a big deal or was on the way to pull off a big deal. They'd borrow 5 or 10 from you till they got it pulled off, you know, but powerless? No way. You see, but there's one basic thing. I hear it all the time in AA groups, there's no must in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. There are two musts. Number one, to be in Alcoholics Anonymous, you must stop drinking. That's right. And number two, you must admit you're powerless over alcohol. If you don't admit that, you're not in the program. You can hang around all the meetings you want to, but you're not in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. So we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and our lives have become unmanageable. And step 2 says we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. I didn't have any problems with that. I didn't mind being insane. I didn't want to be sorry. I didn't want to be the town drunk. But if I was insane, that's sick. I was glad to have the dignity of a disease, folks. I had been told all my life I was just no good. I can remember saying to my wife, honey, don't let the neighbors know I've been drinking. She said, well, how will I explain you being naked out in the backyard? And I'd say, tell them I'm sick. I already knew I was sick. Oh, my wife took me to doctors. My wife's an RN. And she'd take me to doctors. She'd take me to marriage counselors and faith healers and doctors, you know, and I'd go to them all places, you know. Because you can tell them doctors anything. You know, you really can. They don't want them. I'm not saying anything. I don't have anything against doctors, psychiatrists, preachers. I don't have anything against any of those people. They do the best they can with what they got to work with, but what do we give them? Lies. My wife would take me down to the doctor, you know, and he'd say, how much do you drink? And I said, oh, a little. Well, do you have any problems? No. She took me to a psychiatrist one time. Antabuse first come out. He said, I'm going to give you something that's going to make you deathly sick if you drink. I said, doctor, I already get deathly sick when I drink. He said, you mean you know you're going to get deathly sick and you drink anyway? And I said, yes, sir. And he said, I don't understand that. And I said, I don't either. And he charged us $55. She carried me up to a place one time called White Cross in Atlanta, Georgia, $500 a week. Borrowed the money, carried me to White Cross. I went in there, of course, they gave me a pint of whiskey to go. I walked in, you know, and I've been about 3 minutes and the bell rang. Everybody comes running by me in the hall and lined up at the desk, and I asked the attendant, I said, what's this? He said, they ring that bell every hour, and you go up and you get a drink. And he said, the first day you get a drink every hour, and the second day you get a drink every 2 hours, and the third day, you know, every 4 hours. He said, gradually you don't get any more. I said, you mean them poor people that can't go an hour without a drink? He said, that's right. I said, that's pitiful. Next time they rang the bell, I knocked a 62-year-old lady down trying to get up there to the desk and sent me home. I didn't have any problems with insanity. You see, the big book in the 12 and 12 says that we came, you know, and that's the way I was. I just came down to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous one day because I didn't have anywhere else to go. I didn't come down there because I thought they was having a good time, or I didn't come down there, you know, just to pass an hour or two. I came because I didn't have anywhere else to go. I was on probation. I had a bad check charge pending. I was already on probation from another bad check charge. I was on suspension from work. I was fixing to get kicked out of my home. I didn't have any money. I couldn't write a check in the state of Texas because the Central Clearinghouse in Dallas would not let me put my name on a check. There was a notice published by the Central Clearinghouse. That's what I got for my first birthday in AA. My first birthday, my wife gave me a checkbook with my name printed on it. It was the first one I'd had in 6 years, folks. I didn't have any problem with insanity. I came to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous with absolutely nothing. And I sat around there, and one night, a little fellow by the name of Curly said to me, "You ever been so drunk you didn't remember what you did?" And I said, "Yes," and then he asked me a silly question, and it scared me to death, and I came to. And then I sat there for 5 or 6 more months after studying the 12 steps, and one night I looked around at some people, and they began to talk about God, and they said it was through the power of God that they had managed to stay sober 10, 12, 15 years. And I came to believe. I came to believe that somewhere in this world there was hope for people like me. That I was not the town idiot, that I was not sorry as the devil, I was a sick human being. That what I had done was not a great sin except to me. I have been told all my life to get down on my knees, get down on my knees. I stayed there half the time. I go to meetings now with preachers, and they say, "You got to get these alcoholics down on their knees." I said, "Brothers, let me tell you something. Most alcoholics spend a whole lot more time on their knees than you do. If you want to help an alcoholic, get him on his feet and then talk to him about his needs." And then I came to believe that there was a power that could restore me to sanity. I hadn't been in the program a year yet, and I found out I wasn't going to have to be crazy the rest of my life. Isn't that great? Been crazy for 37 years. And in less than 1 year, I'd already found out I didn't have to be crazy the rest of my life. So I went to somebody and I said, "How can I stop being crazy?" And he said, "Read step 3. And I like to have the big one. It said, "Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him." And folks, God as I understood Him, I didn't want any part of. You see, the God that I understood lived way off out yonder somewhere. He had a pair of high-powered binoculars, and he sat on a cloud with an angel on each side of him. And he stared at me all the time. And every time I would almost get up, he would tell one of those angels, "Slap him down again." My word, he's almost up again, and if he gets up, he's going to start running amok. Slap him down again. Don't let him get up. I was raised in a little Baptist church down in South Georgia, and I'd go down there and they'd talk about the unpardonable sin. I didn't know what it was. But I knew one thing. I either had already committed it, or as soon as I was old enough, I intended to. Because I'd already done everything I was capable of doing, and I wanted to do the rest of it. Now, I realize today, folks, and let me clear up something for you. The unpardonable sin that the Bible talks about is blaspheming the Holy Spirit of God. In no way would I do that. But nobody ever told me that. I'd go to church, and that preacher would shake his finger at me and talk about me, and he'd talk about what I'd done, and he'd talk about what I was going to do, and he'd talk about what my father did. And he said that all people who did those things were horrible people. I didn't believe that. My brother was not a horrible person. He would talk about the unforgiveness, that God's going to get you for that. And I went through life believing that God was just waiting to get me. Folks, if God was going to get you, He'd already got you. He's had ample reason. He's had sufficient reason. You see, what step 3 in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous simply says is this, and it's no great mystical thing. You don't have to be a theologian to understand step 3. It simply means that when you're tired of making a mess out of everything that you do, when you're tired of trying to run things, you just put both hands in your pocket and just step back about 2 paces and say, "God, I know that you can do better with it than I have. It's yours. You don't have to wrap it in a package. You don't have to put a bow on it and lay it out there on the lawn. God's not coming after it. He just wants you to be willing to stop hurting long enough to let him help you. And then so, after I came to realize that there was help, that I didn't have to stay crazy the rest of my life, then somebody came along and messed up the whole thing. My sponsor said to me, well, now we've got your spiritual life, we kind of got it on the right track, it's time you did something about others. And I said, I'm not ready to do anything about others. He said, all right, let's finish up with you then. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, I think we better take a fearless and moral inventory of ourselves. And I said, huh? I said, look here, I've only been in this program a little over a year, and already I'm on a speaking basis with God as our understanding. You see, I began to understand that there's a God that loves me. And you know how I found out? I found out that God doesn't live out there turned on a cloud somewhere. He lives inside people like you that I met in Alcoholics Anonymous. And people like this man over here and his sponsor would get up at 12:30 at night and come to my home and sit down with me. They didn't know me from Adam's house cat, and they'd sit and listen to my stuff, you know, and they would talk to me. They didn't talk down to me. They didn't criticize me. They didn't run me down. They listened to me. And they took me by the hand and they said, I love you. I love you. Folks, I can't even remember when somebody said, I love you. I've been to church all my life. But I don't ever remember hearing anybody at church before I started preaching say, I love you. I had come to understand that God loved me. And I thought, that's plenty. Got it all settled. God loves me. And my sponsor said, you're not ready yet. You're not ready yet. You still have a problem. And I said, I've turned my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand him. And he said, well, let's find out what you turned over. And I said, I don't know how to do that. And he said, well, just read the big book. He's always said, read the big book. Read the big book. You know? So I read the big book. He said, get you some pencil and a paper and write it down. And I did. Got me a ream of paper and a whole box of pencils, and I sharpened them up real good, and I got me 3 packs of Winston's, a pot of coffee, pitcher of tea, got a good program on TV, got the stereo going on a good country and western song. I ordered my wife and children out of the house so I would not be disturbed because I didn't want my disease aggravated. See, as soon as I turned my will and my life over to the care of God, I got fame, folks. I quit rationalizing and justifying me, and I started rationalizing and justifying God. God's going to take care of it. I don't have to take an inventory. God's going to take care of everything. I'm not in charge anymore. I don't have to take an inventory. God will take care of me. He says so right here. He doesn't say that at all. I told my sponsor, I said, God's going to take care of me. He said, where'd you get that? I said, it says that in the big book. He said, where? I couldn't find it. I had a friend in prison. So I thought, well, I'll go talk to him about step 4. You know, if I tell him something, he can't get out telling nobody. I've admitted I'm powerless over alcohol. My life's unmanageable. Everybody knows I'm crazy. God's going to take care of that. Why do I have to go blabbing? You see, so I went down there and I said, hey, look, I can't do step 4. I got a little problem. He said, there ain't nothing step 4. There's nothing for you. You ain't got enough to do. He said, get your piece of paper and draw a line right down the middle. So on one side write good and on the other side write bad. I did. He said, now over here you write, there's nothing wrong with me. That's why I couldn't do a 4-step inventory. I was ashamed to write that. I knew it was true. but you got to have some humility, They keep telling you got to have humility in the program. You can't sit down and write there's nothing wrong with me. He said it was all right, so I did. He said, that's good. Now, on the other side of that, I'm a dad-brain liar. And I wrote that, and he said, that's bad. Now you got an inventory started. He said, go home. Finish. So I went home and I found out something, folks, that when you take a 4-step inventory, when you take an inventory, you don't just inventory what's good, do you? If you own a store downtown, you hold inventory, you don't just inventory what's selling good, do you? So you put down that, and then, you have to count the things that aren't selling. And so if I put down something good, I've got to put down something bad. And I discovered something about me. I discovered that I'm not all bad. Not all good either. But I discovered that everything good about me, there's something bad to offset it, and everything bad about me, there's something good to offset it. And that taught me something, that inside me, there are two people. And that any time the good side's up, the bad side's trying to get up and pull him down. And any time the bad side's up, the good side. We have a term for that in church, you understand. But I'm not going into it tonight. What it simply means is that for everything good, there's something bad to offset it, and vice versa. And so you're not all good and you're not all bad, but if you stop being in control, God can keep the good side up. When you run things, the bad side comes up. Now, it's not that hard to understand, is it? So, I don't care how insane you are, how long you were insane. It's not that hard to understand that if God's in control, you're not going to do bad things, and if you're in control, you are. Now you stop and think about what you thought, what are you planning on doing tonight? Who's in charge? I don't know. Don't have to raise your hands or anything. I'm just asking. I like tight jeans too. In moderation. Everything in moderation. I had problems with that when I was in seminary. Preachers. Somebody asked one of the teachers one day. He said, said, "What do you think? What do you think you ought to do when you see a girl with real short shorts walk down the street?" Teacher said, "That's why God put a hinge in your neck right here." And I said, "Well, why did He make it so you bend both ways?" You kicked me out of class. So I did a 4-step inventory, and I was all ready to go. Everything was fine, and I was so proud of myself, and I went running down to my sponsor, and I said, "Hey, look here, I got my inventory done." And he said, "Now you're ready for step 5. And I said, "What is that?" He said, "We admitted to God." I said, "Huh?" "We admitted to God ourselves and another human being the exact nature of our wrongs." That don't make sense. You see, I was taught to believe that God already knows everything. I wrote it, I certainly know, and tell somebody else, you got to be kidding. He got logical on me again. He says, you admit to God for forgiveness. You admit to yourself for understanding, and to another human being for humility. It's real hard to be, feel superior around a group where somebody already knows all about you. Do you ever think about that? So then I did that. I finally did it. I went on down and, I made 5 appointments to take step 5. And finally one night the sponsor showed up over the house and he said, "Get that thing out. We're going to do it, boy." And I did. And then he said, "Okay, now we're ready." He said, step 6 says we're entirely ready to have God remove all our defects of character. Now, they got 2 words in there that really messed that whole thing up. Entirely and all. You see, I'm perfectly willing to get rid of those character defects that I don't like. But you want to be careful about your character defects, folks. I was kind of afraid to give them all up. I was afraid I wouldn't have any character left at all. Are you entirely ready to have God remove all your defects of character? Who are you going to talk about after the meeting tonight? Are you entirely ready to have God remove all your defects of character? I hope you'll have to do it on April the 13th. We get ready to have these defects of character removed as they become a problem to us. I had 2 real big, bad defects of character. And both of them were anger. I didn't know I had a bad temper. Never had noticed it very bad. One night I came home, been in the program about 2 years. I came home. My son was working on a lawnmower. One of those, some of you heard me tell this before, but I tell you what, I remember it like yesterday. It was one of those dumb things that you have to take the axle out to move the wheels up and down, and he had 3 wheels lowered and one was froze. And I said, here, let me do that. Now, I don't know nothing about mechanical stuff, folks. I didn't know the other day that light bulbs screw both ways. I just don't know nothing about mechanics. And so I said, let me do that, and he's got a fit-all wrench on one side of that thing and a pair of vice grip pliers on the other, and a little big hammer, a little sledgehammer, ball-peen hammer about that big. And I grabbed that thing and I pulled it one time, and the wrench slipped off, and my hand went into the blade and just peeled meat back off my off my knuckle. And I took that ball-peen hammer and beat that motor slap off that lawnmower. And I looked up, and my wife and daughter were standing there in the door of the utility room, and she said, well, good afternoon, Mr. Serenity. And so I says, I'm not going to let that blood-burn thing upset me, and I threw that hammer through the garage door. Well, I drove down to Gibson's and bought a new lawnmower, cost $139.95, and the garage door panel cost $94.50, and I decided I couldn't afford a temper like that anymore. So I was ready to get rid of that defective character. Resentment. One night I'm at an AA meeting, and we had one of those controversies that we do not wish to engage in. We had a steering committee meeting, and I'll tell you one thing, I ought not to ever read the preamble before one of those, you see. And me and this guy got in a discussion, and I got mad, and I went home furious at him. And I was smoking cigarettes and drinking Maalox and taking Gelusil tablets and drinking coffee and pacing the floor and kicking the wall and cussing and stomping. And my wife said, you're going to have to settle this. She said, you're falling apart. You're coming apart the same. She said, you're like you used to be when you were drinking. And I said, well, I can understand that. I feel like it, And she said, I said, what do you think I ought to do? And she said, why don't you call the man and see if you can settle it? So I called the man at 2:30 in the morning, and he said, hello. And I said, were you asleep? And he said, well, I was till you called. And I said, we got to get this settled. And he said, what? And I said, this fight we're having. And he said, what fight? Well, I decided right then that I wasn't going to let you make me mad unless I was sure you'd be as sick over as I am. And so I became ready to have another one of my defects of character removed. Now, I still have not had all of them removed. I'm ready to have them removed as they bother me. And that brought me to step 7, And step 7 says we humbly ask him to remove our defects of character. And I don't want to spend any time on that. Because it's very simple about that. When you do the asking and let God do the removing, and that's the only way it'll work. Okay? You can discuss it from now till the cows come home, folks, and unless you do the asking and let God do the removing, you're not going to do step 7. So that brought us to step 8. And my sponsor said, you've got to make a list of all persons you've harmed. I said, I don't think I've really hurt anybody. He said, oh, let's talk about it. So I made a list of all those I'd harmed, and he said, I want you now, you've got to go make amends to them. Well, I put everybody on there but one fella. I didn't like him. You see, I stole something from him, and he stole something from me, and I thought we was even. There was only one problem with that logic, is he wasn't in AA. He wasn't trying to stay sober. I started out to make amends, and I went back to my sponsor. I went up to this one place, and I went in the door, and the guy said, "Get out. I told you I didn't ever want you in this place again. Don't come in here." So I said, "Okay, rain on him. I don't need any trouble, I went on back down to the group there, and my sponsor said, "No," and he said, "Did you make amends up there to Paul?" And I said, "No." He ordered me out of the store, and he said, "Go back." And I said, "He does not need my apology." He said, "He never did. But you need to apologize to him. It doesn't make any difference what he does with it. You've got to go do it." So I went back. I went in, and he come running up there again, and I said, "Wait a minute now." So I understand, I don't know exactly all these things, but I said, "Let me tell you one thing. I just want to tell you that I'm in Alcoholics Anonymous." He said, "I already know that. Half the town knows that." I said, "But I want to also say to you that if I've ever done anything to hurt you or to hurt your business, that I'm sorry." He said, "All right, you said it. Get out." And I did. I never went back. I didn't have to go back anymore. I was through. See, that was his problem. I didn't have to go to bed at night and hope he dies. I don't have to hope anymore that he lives to be 100 years old and has a toothache every day. I've apologized to him. I've asked his forgiveness, and I'm going on about my business. I got through with all my amends, except that one. I didn't need to make amends to him. And boy, AA went sour. I got why I didn't like what they said. I'd go to the meeting, I'd go to the speaker meeting, I'd have to get up and leave because I couldn't agree with what they said anymore. I couldn't go to discussion meetings anymore because they talked about entirely and all. They talked about half measures availed us nothing until we let go absolutely. And I couldn't handle that, so I just quit going. My wife, in her logical way, called my sponsor. She said, "Ray's in trouble." My sponsor came over there, and he said, "What's the matter?" And I said, "I don't know." He said, "Why don't you come to meetings anymore?" I said, "I don't like them. I've been sober 2 years. I don't really need them." He said, "Oh, really?" Yeah. He said, "Look at you. I hadn't shaved in 3 days. I had undressed in about a week. Hadn't had a bath. I was right back. The only thing, I just hadn't taken a drink yet. I was right back in the same old pattern." He said, "Ray, there's somebody that you have not made amends to." And I said, "Yeah, I know that." He said, "Well, you're going to have to." I said, "I can't. You'll put me in jail." And then he looked at me and he said, "I got to tell you something, son. You'd be better off sober in jail than you would drunk on the street." That hurt. That hurt. I said, "Well, I'm going to tell you what. I guess I'll just have to go." It was over in Georgia. My son was 16 years old. He said, "Daddy, I'll go with you." We drove over there, and I went upstairs, went into the place of business, and I went up to the office, and I told the man, I said, "I'm in AA. I got to tell you something." He said, "I heard you were in AA, Ray," and he said, "I want you to know I'm just thrilled to death that your family's happy and things are going good for you again." I said, "You're not going to be happy." I said, "I stole some money from you." He reached down, he got his books out, and he laid them open. He had it marked with a paper clip up there. That in 1965, folks. He said, "Is this what you're talking about?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "I've always known about that." He said, "But Ray, I'm so happy that things are going good for you and that you're making an effort to straighten your life out." He said, "You don't owe me a thing." Boy, I was 10 feet tall. I went running back down those steps. I jumped in the car, and my son said, "Daddy, what did he say?" And I said, "He said it was all right. I didn't owe him anything." He said, "Daddy, you've got to pay him." And I said, "Why do I have to pay him? He don't need it." He said, "But Daddy, all your life, you've been a liar, you've been a cheat, and you've been a thief. And he said, for the last 2 years, you have changed.
And he said, Daddy, you don't want to go back to being what you used to be. Well, I wasn't quite as tall, but I went back up the steps. I told the man, I said, I don't know how in the world I'm going to ever pay you, but I'm going to. We started back to Dallas. We got to Jackson, Mississippi. My son was driving, and he turned off the interstate, and I said, what are you stopping here for? And he said, Daddy, there's a man here you owe some money to. I said, son, I don't have any money. And he said, I know it, Daddy, but Mother gave me a check. And she said if you did the right thing in Georgia, we were to stop and pay this man. And if you didn't, it wouldn't make any difference. You see, I came to the realization that day that they had AA at my house. I hadn't been attending, but they had. Step in says we continued to take a personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. You see, that's very simple. Alcoholics are kind of like manure piles. And when a seed falls on a manure pile, if you don't pull that root out real fast, it'll grow into a full-grown weed in about 24 hours. So every night before we go to bed, we have to weed our pile. So we take step 10 so we don't have to go back and take step 1. Step 11 says we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will and the power to carry that out. And folks, by the time you get to step 10, you've got to have a conscious contact with God. And you need to maintain it on a daily basis. You see, prayer and meditation is just simply a means of communicating with God. And you see, God, as I understand Him, loves to hear from us. You don't have to tell Him what to do. He's not Sears Roebuck. You don't have to send any orders in. All you have to do is say, I'm still here, and I'm still willing, and I've still turned it over, and would you be in charge? You don't have to tell Him to take anything away. You don't have to tell Him to put anything in, because, folks, as long as you're seeking God's will for your life, things are going to be all right. You see, the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is not a question of whether or not we're going to drink. It's really a question of who's going to be in charge. Am I going to be in charge today and mess it up? Or am I going to let God be in charge and have everything go real good? Step 12 says that we, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. And by the time I got there, I began to be dissatisfied again. You see, nothing was happening in my life. I looked around at all the people who had come into AA with me, and they were laughing and smiling and having a good time, and by this time I had been in the program for 3 years, and nothing has happened. I go to work, and I come home, and I go to them old meetings, and I listen to them old speakers, and I come home, and I go to discussion meetings, and I wait my turn, and I say my piece, and I come home, and nothing happens. So I went down to see my sponsor. And bless his heart, he's still just as big a horse as patooed as he ever was, and he said, I said, when is something good going to happen to me? Why is everybody else happier than I am? And he said, Ray, maybe you're one of those people good things never happen to. And you see, I already knew that. I had always known that I was different. I was one of those people that things were never going to be good for. Poor old me. And Al looked at me and he said, Ray, how are things at home? And I said, they're great. How's your wife? I said, fine. Where do you sleep? I said, in the master bedroom on the king size bed with my wife. He said, how are the children? I said, they're great. I said, they have so much company down there, Al, sometimes I have to go to the service station to use the restroom. He said, how are things at work? I said, I've been promoted. I'm head of the department now. And he said, huh? How did you get down here today, Ray? And I said, in my new car. He said, Ray, I hope that you stay in AA long enough for something good to happen to you. You see, I called him my dirty name, and I walked out of his office that day, and I went down to a little park in Irving, and I sat down under a pecan tree, and I guess the people thought I'd gone crazy. Because I sat there for about 4 hours, and I cried because I realized how blind and how dumb I really was. And as I sat there under that tree, I began to look back on some of the things that had happened in the 3 years we had been in AA. And I looked back, you know, on the night that I was invited to the recital. I didn't want to go. I'm more the Roy Acuff type, you know, but my wife insisted that we go, and when I got there, it was my daughter. She sang in 5 languages, beautiful, and I didn't even know she could sing. I sat there that day and I cried. I had a son who was in the Air Force in Germany, and he was a Mars operator. And every day, every week, he called me. And on that Mars hookup, everybody can hear you, you know. Anybody that's got a radio between there and here can listen in. And that 21-year-old boy never hung up without saying, Daddy, I love you. And I thought, how many people have a 21-year-old son that says, Daddy, I love you? I thought back to the night my son graduated from high school, and I sat there in Irving Stadium where the Cowboys play, and I looked around at all of those people, and they were all there because they expected to be all the time. Their kids were in high school. They expected to be there. I was there because my son invited me to be there. I had no right to be there because of the way I had treated them, but he loved his daddy. And then the next year when my daughter graduated, I was there again, and this time I was down on the front row, and she brought all of her friends from the graduating class by and said, I want you to meet my daddy. This is my daddy. I thought about, you know, I was telling some of the people, Lewis and his wife, and Robin today, I showed them a picture of my daughter, and everyone see it. She's getting married June the 4th, and she's beautiful. And I said, guess what? I'm going to be at the wedding. That doesn't sound like much to most folks. Most fathers go to their daughters' weddings, but you know, 10 years ago I wouldn't have been invited. 11 years ago I would have been forbidden to go. So you see, so many things have happened to us. And then I look back on that night that they came to my house. And then that next night I went to my first AA meeting. And my little boy went up to the 7-Eleven store, and he used the change out of his pocket, and he called his grandmother in Kentucky. And when she answered the phone, all he could say was, Mom, my daddy don't drink no more. And I realized all the things that I had missed. I thought about my mother-in-law who had died. I had the letter that she wrote me right after I came into AA, and she said she had cancer. And she said, Ray, I'm not afraid to die, but she says they're giving me cobalt treatments, and I'm scared to death when they put me in that room by myself. But she said, I found a way to deal with my problem. She says, while I'm in there getting those treatments, I pray for you and your problem. And I was wiped out. You see, my mother-in-law was the only person who never gave up on me. She didn't know what an alcoholic was, but she used to say to the family, you leave Ray alone. Someday God's got a purpose for him. I flew up there to see her, and she told me before she died, she said, Ray, God has spared you for something. Little did I know what it was. I decided I'd go back to church. Didn't work. I thought church was going to be like AA. Nobody hugged my neck. Very few people shook my hand. I started teaching Sunday school. I didn't like that. I quit. I became Sunday school superintendent. I didn't like that. I quit. Had a very understanding pastor. He'd come and talk to me, and he'd listen to me, and I'd tell him how sorry all those folks were at church and how good everybody was at AA. And being a pastor myself now, I know how you must love that. And one day he said to me, he said, you know, if AA has so much more love and so much more charity and so much more compassion, maybe you could teach us at church how to do the same thing. Planted a seed. I went home and I was sitting in my room one Sunday afternoon, and I had the big book in one hand, and I had the Bible in the other, and that's dangerous. I didn't really understand either one of them, you know, and I was trying to pray, and I said, God, what is it exactly? And I looked down at the big book, and I read step 3 again, and it says, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. And I said, but God, I've just now got things straight. You know, I just now got the bills paid. You know, we just now have gotten where we can buy groceries for cash. You know, I just now am getting to the point where I'm comfortable. And I looked over at the Bible, and it was open to the 9th chapter of the book of Acts, which is the account of Paul's conversion on the road to Damascus. And Paul said, I was the chief among sinners, and I, yet threatening, set out to destroy those I found in the way. And I began to understand that if God could take a man like Saul of Tarsus and make Paul out of him, that he could take a man like Ray Vowel and make something out of him. And I got up and I went into the den where my wife sat, and I said, I believe God has just called me to preach. And she said, what and to who? I believe that I have the best wife that God ever gave any human being. She's one of those poor, unfortunate ladies who's been raised in a Baptist home and believes that marriages are made forever. And we're one of those rarities in our circle of friends. We're still married to the same people we started out with 27 years ago. And the only argument I've ever won in our marriage is that I always tell her that I'm smarter than you are. We can look at who we each married and tell that. You see, no way could I have put up with what she put up with. She said, Ray, if you think God's calling you to preach, you do what you think you've got to do. The next morning at 9 o'clock, I put my house on the market. And before noon, I had sold it for cash. We sold all of our furniture. We sold 2 of our 3 cars. And we set out for me to go to the seminary, and they took a job at South Texas Children's Home, which is a Baptist children's home in Beeville, Texas. And I prepared to be a minister, and we entered the happiest period of our life. You see, I have not become St. Raymond yet. I'm still fully aware of my shortcomings. I'm still aware of my character defects. But you see, 30 years ago, in a little town in South Georgia, the county judge looked at me and he said, son, you're nothing. You're never going to be anything. 6 months later, my father looked at me and he said, I wish you'd leave. You're nothing. I joined the Navy, and I remember the doctor in the Navy telling me, son, you're nothing. I married a wonderful woman, and her father told me, son, you're nothing. You're the worst thing that ever happened to our family. I had bosses to tell me I was nothing. I had policemen to tell me I was nothing. I had lawyers tell me I was nothing. I had banks to tell me I was nothing. And so finally, I decided I'd become nothing. July of 1971, I made it. I was absolutely nothing. I had nothing, I wanted nothing, and I could do nothing. And I brought that nothing to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And with the help of loving people like you, and the help of my higher power that I unashamedly call God, He took that nothing and mixed His grace with it. And He made something out of it. It's not important that you think it's something. It's not important that the whole world think it's something. It's only important that I know tonight that it's something. And as long as I have a higher power, I don't have to drink unless I choose to. You see, I stand here tonight as the simple product of God's grace applied to what I used to be. And my program consists of two very, very simple things. Number one, I know which drink makes me drunk. The first one. And I know who, with God's help, has the choice over whether or not I take it, and that's me. Thank you for letting me come.
Thank you so much, Ray. I'm sorry that you can't stay for the whole conference. You're leaving a lot of love with us, and we hope when you go out of this hole, you'll take a lot with you, and I'm sure you will. For those who don't know, Marilyn, how soon is she gone? And how soon is it going to be ready up there? Okay. For those who don't know, most everybody does, right up the trail there to the open building, I don't know what to call that thing. We'll have snacks and fellowship and singing and have a good time. Some of you I know will want to come up and meet Ray, and I think he'll probably be standing up here so you can come up and meet him and shake hands. And I'll be up at the head of the chow line if you want to come by and smell me. We got anything else? Oh, yes. Tapes of this conference are being made, and I don't know who else taping, but at the back of the room there, you can buy these tapes, and I think in most cases they'll probably be ready by the time the next meeting opens. They've got a rapid setup on this now. Anything else? Shall we join hands and close with the Lord's Prayer, please?